following is a presentation of Learfield IMG College. From the Georgia Southern Sports Network, powered by Learfield IMG College.
Wings up, Eagle Nation! Touchdown, Georgia Southern!
This is Inside Eagle Nation, your all-access look into Eagle athletics.
Taking a look through all the other action in Georgia Southern athletics this past week. A lot of road action. A lot of teams hitting the old I-16 out of town.
Getting on the steel horse and taking us to parts north, south, west, wherever. Can't really go too much farther east.
Now let's return to the Learfield IMG College studios. Here are your hosts, Colin Lacy and Danny Reed.
That's a fact, Jack.
Welcome into another edition of Inside Eagle Nation, your all-access look inside Georgia Southern athletics, episode number 165. Here from the basement of Hanner, Colin Lacy alongside the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed. A busy episode to get to this week. We're going to check in on Georgia Southern men's and women's basketball per usual. Going to catch up on everything else going around Georgia Southern athletics as a couple of different sports getting going this past weekend. Tennis, rifle, swim and dive, track all got in action for their spring portion of the schedule.
The one good thing is that if you're a rifle, you never have a rain delay.
That's a very good point. Neither does basketball.
Sometimes we get a...
That's true.
Well,
sometimes, maybe.
But, yeah.
Anyway.
Hanner's very charming. We know that.
But we'll get into everything Georgia Southern athletics a little bit later on. But now we visit with the Director of Athletics, Jared Benko. Jared, appreciate you joining us.
No, glad to be here. I've seen the humble abode online to see it in person, and I'm looking up at this old jersey. I'm trying to see that's Danny's old jersey back from intramural days, or maybe even rec ball.
Well, it's when they did the you guys had the senior staff basketball tournament.
Basketball. Yeah, we should have brought that
That's
in.
what we could have done, just taken jerseys from down here and have y'all wear them.
The way that I played that day, number one would not have been the number I should have worn.
I know the other number, but I'm not going to say it on air.
Talk about this last year as you entered 2022. You just put out your Benko briefing a couple of days ago. As you entered 2022, you talked about it throughout a couple of different staff meetings of taking a look back at what 2021 had to offer for Georgia Southern athletics. When you look back, what's some of the things that really stand out?
Well, I would say comprehensive excellence across the board. You know, we've talked about from day one that, we're competing against ourselves. I'm not worried. We're not worried about any other institution in the state, outside the state. We're our toughest critics, and ultimately we're benchmarking against ourselves. And, what you saw with two Sun Belt championships this past spring, obviously with women's tennis and men's golf, had success in other sports as well. Then you start looking about, academically, we've had two of the last three semesters have had GPA records. And then, from a fundraising standpoint, philanthropic giving, we set a record this past summer. We're already on track. I think we're less than $1 million already from passing that from last year. So we're on track for another record fundraising year. So all in all, it's just across the board competitive excellence. And, it's interesting. I'm sure we'll talk about facilities here in a little bit. I take great pleasure, especially, being highly aspirational as a department, right? And two, some things that were shared when I first got here of all the challenges, all the ceilings, and all the reasons why we couldn't do stuff. We're slowly and surely starting to prove that's wrong. And we can do anything we want to do. But it is going to require an immense amount of teamwork. And the great thing about our current setup is alignment from Dr. Marrero on down. I've been at 5 institutions, probably worked for 6, 7 presidents, and he's by far the best one. And he's extremely special in what he does, and he understands the values that athletics brings to a university of higher education. And so when you have that alignment and you look at where we're going, I mean, man, it's so exciting to look at 2022, and then of course, you're looking at the next 3 to 5 years could be really special.
And we're coming up on 2 years now since you got to Statesboro. It's hard to believe it's been that long already. But over last summer is when you put out the 5-year strategic plan, and a lot of the things we just talked about were part of that plan last summer. But that's not a document you just put out to get people fired up and just to present ideas. That's a living document, and we've seen various things take place over these last few months.
Yeah, otherwise it'd been a big waste of time if we didn't look at it, right? In fact, this Friday coming up, we're going to have a half-day work session, and the 128 objectives, or I should say initiatives we had, we went through and assigned them a stakeholder to each one. And so we're going back Friday to see how we progress. And in fact, externally, that process has already started. I'm going to look at some of the internal benchmarks. But, yeah, I mean, in some ways, I'm sure we'll find we're ahead of some metrics and behind in others. But that's what a strategic plan is. You want it to be lofty. You want to hit some goals. Some goals should be very aspirational. If you hit them all in the first 6 months, it wasn't a very good 5-year plan, right? So, but for us, I mean, I think the great thing, and Colin and Danny, y'all get a chance to sit in our staff meetings. I think what you start to see is what I hope is teamwork across the board, and also too, enjoying each other's company. I share a lot of times, we do the hiring process, recruitment process, that we spend more time with each other than honestly, unfortunately, sometimes in our family, just because athletics is a lifestyle. And so you want to work with people, one, you enjoy being around, but two, that share the same fire and passion for Georgia Southern that you have. And so that's what really is special, is each person we're bringing on board or who's already been here, when you combine them together, we've got a special group of administrators, coaches, and, of course, student athletes.
As you dive into what you were talking about in your Benko briefing, one of the first things you touched on was the scheduling, and it's affected Georgia Southern men's and women's basketball so far. Now that you're kind of in the second round of having to go through that scheduling and cancellation process, is it any more easier now that you had last year to kind of deal with it as well?
In some ways, I don't know, it's so much easy. I think like last year, obviously, we were making it up as we went along, just to be honest with you. And last year, of course, too, we tried to make up games. Yeah. So in some ways, this year's easier because there are no contests. We're not rescheduling them. The one thing that's consistent from last year to this year is really, in some ways, a hopeless feeling of you really can't do much. And I'm empathetic for our student athletes and also for our coaches. Our coaches and student athletes put a lot of time in on scouting reports and obviously practicing. And Danny and Colin, obviously y'all travel with our men's and women's basketball teams just to stop and go. And last year, if you'd asked me, volleyball, Chad Wilson volleyball was the most detrimentally impacted in the fall of 20. This past fall, had a full volleyball, full soccer, got off to a great start this academic year, athletic year. But basketball now, 2 years in a row, has been stop and go at different times. And so I'm empathetic there just because it's just, there's challenges there. And it's every team in the country. You're trying to, obviously build a roster, and you're trying to, as Coach Burke, when he had 2 letter winners here when he got here and didn't receive a ton of playing time. I mean, he's still in a lot of ways in year 1. Coach Howard's in year 3 on paper, but in some ways it's still year 2 for, just in terms of kind of getting people here, consistent game playing, and so I know if I was in their shoes as a student athlete, I'd probably be frustrated. Not that you can't control it, obviously, it's just because it's a stop and go.
With all of the cancellations, the postponements that have surfaced, again, there have been reports that have come out earlier today that the Sun Belt, as of February 1st, is going to say if you are not boosted, then you are considered unvaccinated, so that there's a chance that these cancellations could get even worse by the time that February gets here. But from the standpoint of Georgia Southern, you've been so proactive in making sure that you've given your student athletes and your coaches, your administrators, as much information as you can about how safe you can be if you're vaccinated, if you're boosted. So how can Georgia Southern be in the best position if things happen to go south across the country as they have been these last few weeks?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm optimistic that there's good news on the horizon. I think if you listen to epidemiologists and others, in the next, in fact, you look at South Africa and other places, it's really it's as much as it spikes up, it spikes back down. Yeah. So for us, we're obviously going to make sure our student athletes know what's available, whether it be a booster shot or the first and second vaccinations, depending upon what dose they take. Because really for us is we're strongly encouraging the vaccinations, but at the same standpoint as individual choice. And so we try to make sure our student athletes are armed with information. Now, we're actually going to meet in Atlanta. We have our winter AD meetings, in fact, a week from today in Atlanta. So this topic will probably come up. So we haven't spent a ton of time on that. I know we're going to talk a lot about, not a different segue, but conference expansion, football scheduling. We've got a lot of things on the docket. So it's going to be a pretty heavy, I guess it'd be 2 days, but 1 full day of meetings. We got a lot of topics, and that will probably come up.
If we can stay on that point, we know that 4 teams are coming into our league. That was rumored to be not this coming year, but the next. But now there's information coming out that could happen as soon. as this coming athletic season in the course of James Madison, they're applying for a waiver that would make this a mulligan year. They could still compete for the conference, but they couldn't win championships. They'd be a full member as the time 23 gets here. What information is available regarding that you could share with us?
Yeah, it's still, there's no finality there, but as I've shared all our coaches, we have to prepare for all 4 institutions coming into the Sun Belt next year. While nothing's been decided yet, I think that's probably the best way to approach it. Now, obviously with Little Rock and UTA and their destinations and moving out, you could have a 1-year outlier where there could be 15 or 16 teams. There's a lot of balls in there. So I think we'll have more clarity next week. But we have to plan on that being the case. And obviously you look at our football schedule just because it kind of leads right into the fall. What I've shared, and obviously and Commissioner Gill's done a great job and his staff, is when it comes to the scheduling piece, I would really like to make sure on arrivals we're not back-to-back, road games per se like we were at App last year. When you're trying to – I haven't seen the scheduling, consortium or aggregate, but I want to make sure that obviously, we try to get a rival at home.
Well, especially considering that all 4 that are coming in the league are all more than 500 miles away from Statesboro. So travel-wise, that's going to create some, maybe not necessarily some difficulties, but some things that you wouldn't have had to consider if the league would have still been the way it currently stands.
Yeah, and I guess to me, sometimes, especially with just our location being off 95, I haven't actually looked at the Google Maps yet or Apple Maps, but to your point, it's in some ways it just feels closer going up the East Coast and going out to Texas or whatnot. Now, we'll have the 2 cross-division rivals. My understanding is, unless nothing's changed, is they're going to constantly be rotating, which I kind of like. Obviously, when I was in SEC, you had a permanent crossover and you had one rotating. The challenge is with that is, if you're a student-athlete experience, you don't get a chance to see all the other venues. And so this case, obviously, when you look at the setup, if it's done the way it's been discussed, and all the student-athletes have a chance, hopefully, to play in most, if not all, of the stadiums.
As always, you can get your questions in for Jared coming in on Facebook Live if you're watching it live with us here on Monday night. But one of the things that you brought up, and we've talked about it a couple of different times, is the gift from the Tippins family, the largest philanthropic gift that Georgia Southern Athletics has ever received. And it also gives you the opportunity to, whenever the budgeting and design phases of the indoor practice facility is complete, you go straight into construction. Yeah. How big is that for Georgia Southern, and kind of put it in perspective of what it means for Georgia Southern?
Well, it's huge, and I think, one, it addresses an operational need. Day one, getting here, and everyone, especially related on the football team, when you look at student athletes, coaches, staff, trainers, managers, you got 160, 170 people on a field. There's just some challenges I haven't seen other institutions relative to practicing on one field, and obviously once the Ted Smith Center was built over there, obviously that's been kind of the home base. So this is going to give a huge operational boost to not only football, but also to baseball, softball, and your soccer teams in particular. Yeah. And the great thing about this facility, obviously, is you have a chance to, one, obviously have an operational component, but 2, there's also, with a game day suites, a revenue component. But going back to obviously Anthony Tippins and his family, who've been so very generous, not only with their, philanthropic and financial giving, but also their time, as Anthony's our past president of the Athletic Foundation Board and still serves in a capacity on the executive committee. And so, he's true blue. And so I think the great thing about that donation was, one, it really spearheaded and allowed us to position ourselves. And right now we're working towards potentially a groundbreaking as early as a spring game. Now, as we know, just from a commodity standpoint, you see on the news that steel, there's a lead time or a lag time on that. So right now we're working towards trying to procure that steel and get it here as soon as possible, late summer, early fall. So this thing's coming, and then right behind us, the Convocation Center groundbreaking as well. Yeah. But no, the Tippins family's been so very generous, as other people have too, and we've been very, just very blessed and very thankful for everyone that has chosen to get involved. Because listen, as much as Anthony's league gift was huge in the Tippins family, we've also had people come in at obviously smaller amounts, and it just shows you how powerful and how supportive Eagle Nation is, and so we've been very humbled by the support.
There's definitely been an uptick in major gifts, but where we're headed, there's a chance for a lot of, if not all of Eagle Nation to be a part of this, because if there's one thing that probably popped out most from the briefing, it's that There's going to be about a quarter of the tickets that are going to go up next year for football, all the parking, donor levels, the per-seat donation. I'm sure that's going to catch some people's attention. That's all going to roll out here within the next few weeks. But to provide some further context,
Sure.
what can people look forward to and how this is going to benefit the greater good as we try to move forward with facilities projects to get the whole athletic program on the track that it needs to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. Danny, I would start at 100,000-foot vantage point in that, major gifts, there's really two buckets or two legs of a table in theory that really athletics from a funding standpoint are supported. You've got obviously your major gifts, which we talked about, the indoor facility, which is dollars specifically given for a facility or a need, right? Then you have on the other side, the other leg is going to be all the operational budgets, which is coaches' salaries, that's student athlete scholarships, that's operational costs, financial aid costs, you name it. And so for us, when you look at, yes, we've had an incredible last year and a half, and major gifts, and continue to be very aspirational with our goal setting there. But we also, it's kind of like if you're working out and you work one arm really, really tough and you get one arm really strong, this other arm has to also be reciprocated, and that's really where if you look at the annual giving side of their Grossel Fund, and for us, having not, we're in the 8th year if you think about it, being an FBS institution, and our donation, our ticket prices, as an aggregate, we haven't raised in really 8 years. Yeah. And then parking wise as well, we're going to lose, just a little bit north of 537 spots to be exact on the water tower side. Now we'll have some come back after the facility is fully online, but it's going to be a construction zone. And so we're going to be reseeding all the parking as well based on lifetime giving and our Grossel Fund giving as an aggregate. So, it's a lot of heavy lifting, but here's why it's so important for us is, right now we're 7th of 10 schools and 7th, I guess, if you look at the 2 going out, but 7 of 10 in football and 10 of 14 coming in. And so for us, in fact, James Madison in FY20 was at $58 million. Yeah. We're at 29. And so we're not, as we've shared with our staff, we don't talk about what we don't have. We're blessed in abundance, and we the best fans in the country. And you look at just the traditions and 6 national championships. I mean, we are in an unbelievable space. But when you start looking at where we want to go and the coaches, retain the coaches we have and facilities, we've got to continue to ramp this thing up. And really for us is we've tried, to look at ways creatively. And I'll give you a great example is right now, if you look at, Paulson, there's roughly 5 premium areas, right? Right now we're at 9, potentially 10, and some of those are retrofitting seats. Some we're just making up premiums as we go along. So part of that has taken also not just hey, we're raising prices, we're actually bringing new inventory to the table. Yeah. And here's the thing I like about a lot of it, and I'm probably divulging too much for it, it's still being finalized. It's just kind of like when you go to a concert, if you go to a pro football stadium, some people want a premium experience, some don't. So our goal has always been to offer as many price points as possible, because that way each family, each individual or couple can find out or identify what they want to spend their hard-earned dollars for, which we greatly appreciate. And so you can look at this new model of premium experience that starts at, when you look at the ticket price and the donation, is $66, $64 all in, all the way up to $278 per game all in. And so what you've got, and those are the cabanas on the field. And so we're creating those price points where if you're looking at a concert, looking at a pro game, they're really similar to what the pro stadiums are doing. And again, it gives people an opportunity to find, what they want to, acquire or purchase. So we're excited about the new inventory coming online. And obviously, Eagle Nation, we need, we got a new campaign coming out. We need you, because we do, Eagle Nation. We do need you, and we can't do this without you. And so part of this is trying to make sure that we're being as diligent as possible, turn over every stone possible. But this is the next way to continue to generate, more cash and allow us to really operate at a high level.
You bring up the point of, and it's something that I think a lot of people try to stay away from and don't necessarily put out, the fact that Georgia Southern, like you talked about, 7th of the 10 schools in the Sun Belt Conference right now as far as operating budget, and we'll move down whenever the 4 new schools come in. But it's not a sense of the woe is me. It's more of how much Georgia Southern can impact and the we need you that you talked about as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time, Danny, you mentioned almost 2 years. That's crazy. I guess it'll be 2 years, first of March, and I've had a blast. Been 2 of the best years of my life. But I'll tell you this, in the 2 years I've been here, I don't get in front of our coaches, and I've talked about championships. It's always been the daily embracement of a process. Did you win the day? Did you lose the day? And the second thing, I haven't once talked about where we are as a budget, not to fans, not at Eagle clubs, you name it, because I don't like that doesn't really mean as much to me when we're starting. We're going to talk about what we do have. But now as we get to the point where we're at a crossroads of sorts of revisiting where we are, we have to have a baseline. Now, our goal is to continue to narrow that delta as much as we can. But now 2 years in, we've made significant strides, on the major gift side, in the foundation side. But now it's the side, obviously the annual fund side, to make that next jump. And if anything, like I said, when we talk to our coaches and staff, we always talk about what we have. Because I'm not really interested in, at times if someone says, well, this school has this or that one has this, let's talk about Georgia Southern. Let's talk about how we make sure we maximize everything we have, every resource we have. And resources beyond money too, right? It's obviously fan support, it's institutional support, you name it. So we're very blessed, and I think going back to your point, that was just a messaging first time in 2 years to say, hey, listen, here's where we are. Because I think part of that, it wasn't a knee-jerk decision. There's a lot of thought. This entire offseason has been, even during the season, thinking about, obviously, what direction we're going. And really, listen, with Coach Helton and the excitement there, I'm ready for spring ball. I'm ready to get going. So.
This is so much of an investment. And I think back to when this program started. This was before any of us were here. But everybody had to do a little bit.
Yep.
Now we're at a point where it's the 8th year since making the transition. We're clearly not the new kid on the block anymore. But you look across the conference with the money that's being spent at Appalachian State, at Louisiana, Coastal Carolina. They're about to add their indoor very soon. It's clear that it's time to step up a little bit. But it can go back to the idea that we talked about a little bit earlier. The major gifts are going to be a major part of that. But if everybody can find a way to do a little bit more, it's going to help so much.
Yeah, and going back to the increases that you mentioned in the briefing, whether it be the annual fund side, whether it be for donations and a few tickets, really, if you think about what that's going towards, is continuing to fund our student athletes at a high level academically. As obviously look at tuition and we've really made an investment in sports psychology, nutrition. We just hired our first nutritionist about 5 months ago. So, and then from athletic training, we've got a huge gamut, almost 14 full-time athletic trainers. So, we were surrounding the student athlete as much as we ever have. So that's where the money's going there. And also, too, when you start to see the success, whether it be, volleyball this year going up 100-plus RPI spots, women's soccer 198 RPI spots, and our teams continue to have success, people take an interest of what's happening at Georgia Southern. And, you want to remain competitive in the market space to retain your top coaches as well. And so all that money is to say is that we need that. And also, too, as our teams continue to have success, we want to go out and play the best. And sometimes that means we got to travel a little more. It means we got to recruit more. And so all in that is a funnel, continue to have success. It takes more and more to fuel that momentum to continue to become. Because our goal, listen, is not to be a middle-of-the-road program of all 17 sports. We want to be elite in every single sport. And to do that, ultimately, you got to make sure you have the right people on the bus, right, which we do, and the right seats on the bus. And now you got to fuel that bus, and that's kind of where we're at right now.
It's a yellow bus, right?
Yellow bus.
It's a yellow bus.
Yellow bus.
One thing that I also want to bring up is that the NCAA is on the verge of a drastic reorganization in regards to NIL and in regards to a lot of different things, and we know that is coming up rather soon.
Yep.
What should Eagle Nation know about what is about to happen with respect to the NCAA?
Well, there's going to be a lot of changes, as you mentioned. I think, a lot of the talk, there's a couple different conversations right now. What happens with the CFP? And, obviously, and I have my feelings on that. I personally would like to, as far as the 12 field, the 12-team field, the 6 at-larges and the 6 automatic qualifiers, I like it where the 6-1 is going to be the highest of the group of 5s versus the second model. So that's going to be discussed. I don't know. I mean, it seems like it's the same Groundhog Day. I just saw an Arthur wrote, a journalist wrote about it being Groundhog Day discussions. I don't know how many times you can talk about a 12-game model, but I hope that's what comes to fruition. And then everything with name, image, likeness, everything from how revenues are really distributed through the NCAA. You're taking an NCAA constitution that sometimes you could argue you need a lot of caffeine to read through, and some glasses in case you get some eye strain. It's a very thick manual, and simplifying that. And so, there's a lot of talk. The next year and a half to 3 years could be as transformational as the NCAA organization's been through in a long time. So, we'll go through. I think is this week the voting process this week, and have a chance. There's some different meetings going on. I'm doing it virtual this year. I think a lot of people are doing it virtual, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting time for sure. Then the NIL piece. I mean, that's something that it's just crazy what's happening now. I had a chance over the break to talk to some former colleagues of mine and mentors at the Power 5 level, what they're seeing and how it's impacting recruiting. And obviously, we all agree federal legislation would help there a lot because it is an interesting. Today's not the time to share stories, but it's interesting what's going on. So.
Got a question coming in on Facebook Live. Lance Smith asking, are there any plans to add any additional scholarship athletic programs?
Right now is a from a Title IX Prong 3 school, right? We're focused right now at the 17 sports, so trying to fund those the best we can, and also in relation to our interest from our student body. So right now we're still focused on that, but obviously we always keep a pulse on the student body and kind of where we are. But right now the 17 is kind of where we are.
One of the common things that you have said ever since you stepped foot on campus is the brightest days are ahead for Georgia Southern. What does the future look like from where you sit right now for Eagle Nation?
Well, I tell you, I was sharing with our staff, and y'all were in the other day, the best thing that myself and our leaders in the department can say to somebody, and that's whether it be a staff or a coach or a student athlete, is that we believe in you. And I don't take that lightly. I think in times of my life, whether it be my parents or mentors that said, "Hey, Jared, I believe in you. You can do this. You can accomplish this. You can make an A in this test, whatever the case is." And I think for so long, the silos that existed here have been broken down. I think the teamwork, having the coaches. I mean, I've seen the close knit head coaches. We have our head coaches meeting, and really, it's interesting. We have a head coach and a senior staff member lead those, and I'll find some Twitter videos or some quotes or a passage of a book, and they lead discussion. And what you're seeing is organic growth amongst all the head coaches. And then we're having professional development opportunities. In fact, we have one, I think, next week. And so the reason why I share that is a lot of places I've been to talk about family. But it really starts with do you genuinely care about people? Do you genuinely want what's best for them? And what I try to share with our staff is that you can have your goals and aspirations, and they can run parallel to the departments and not perpendicular. And so much of looking towards the future is really enjoying who you're working with and understanding they're going to work just as hard as you are. And so when I think about the future, to me, all I see is that continuing, day after day after day of putting in the work, putting in the time and effort. And ultimately the student athletes we're recruiting to campus now are as high achieving athletically and academically that we've ever had. And so when you start thinking about the future, it gets you excited because the right people are here. And listen, it's not just football. It's all 17 sports. Every single sport, every single student athlete matters. And our job, as we talked about, we're looking at the future, is we talk to their mom and dads and being involved in recruiting. Hey, the days of finishing with a degree at Georgia Southern, just that, while it's a great degree to have, that's not good enough anymore. Our job now is to try the best we can, not only to get a degree and make sure they have every opportunity to get that, but now to hopefully leave here with a job or on the right trackway or pathway for a job. And that's what excites me, because now the student athletes, I'll give you a great example, and I'm digressing here, but if you think about our student athletes now, we're having a chance to take 30-plus student athletes to Atlanta this spring to visit Home Depot, to go to Mercedes-Benz, to go into Dr. King's, especially obviously today with Dr. King, MLK Day, just the impact he's had on our country and our culture. To have a chance to visit his center as well and his museum. So we're having a chance to take those student athletes, and then ultimately, this summer we're making a competitive process to have 2 student athletes study abroad. So the reason why that's important is everything's about the student athlete, and we're trying to make sure we give them the best experience possible.
All right, before we let you go, one of the things that you've stressed the last couple of months of over the holidays, make sure you spend some time with family, get some time to recharge a little bit. What's your favorite thing to do when you try to sit back and recharge a little bit?
You already know the answer to this question.
Well,
and playing pranks on Chris Davis is not it.
That was going to be my guess.
Well, I was going to tell you when I got here today, I'm glad I'm following big shoes with Eric Reasoner last week. So I'm not going to pick on Eric. But no, I would tell you this is the right response is spending time with my wife is first.
Get your brownie points. There you go.
Yeah, her birthday's next month. So, no, really my family time. At times, as I shared before in the football coaching piece, I do sometimes a bad job of putting my phone down, and I love what I do. I mean, part of that is not an excuse. I love what I do. I love Georgia Side. I love every day waking up and having a chance to work alongside y'all and our staff. And so I don't look at it as work, but sometimes I don't do a good job disconnecting. And so over the break, I had a good chance to spend time with family and friends, and obviously grilling is kind of one of my hobbies. I want to get better at golf because the competitor in me, my son, is fastly coming close to beating me in golf, and he's 8. So I feel good about other sports of me holding on for a while, but his golf game has significantly gotten better, and mine's about the same. So I've got to start playing a little more. I enjoy playing golf. I just, when you're not good at something, it kind of gets frustrating. So I've got to get better at that, though. So golf will soon become a hobby. Right now is grilling. So.
I know the grilling has always been something since you've been here. Is it something that you've had for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed grilling a lot of times. Honestly, just grew up and like everybody on a gas grill, and then I got a smoker. I don't know, it was 2017, 2018, and started just tinkering around with it because if you're new to it, it's kind of intimidating because you're like, what do I do and how do I cook stuff, and especially when you're spending money on meat, you're like, I don't want this to stink and not taste good. So as I felt the first brisket, I was like, wow, this better be good. But no, I think you start doing them. When I got here, and obviously we were in COVID and didn't go out to eat as much, I was like, well, this is a chance to try it now. And as I've said before, and I will share a quick funny story. So the last day of the recruiting, I guess, open period, we had 2 recruits on campus, and actually was cooking a brisket for the staff because most of them gotten here by then, or a good bit of. And I brought it up to Clay, Coach Helton, and them, and said, "Hey, just want to cook y'all dinner. I'll make you dinner, and just want to thank you for putting in the hard work." Well, brought it up there. Well, two of the official recruits were there, and they actually ended up committing. You probably can figure out who those were. And Clay called me back, and he said it was the brisket that got it done. I said, no, it wasn't the brisket, but no, we listen. We enjoy having people over the house and have people, whether department, non-department, come over, and if they don't like the cooking, they can just not say anything. So.
Jared, really appreciate you taking some time. Really enjoyed getting to catch up with you as much as we do. Thank you for everything that you do for Georgia Southern Athletics.
Thank you. Hey, listen, congratulate Colin again as well.
Thank you, sir.
Rachel.
Yep.
New
July
arrival.
25th.
July 25th. You better enjoy the free time now. How many times have you been told you need to get some sleep?
Everybody.
Everybody?
And it's all the Nick Sparacio, Nick Skulls, the ones that have the new babies, are the ones that are telling me that.
Well, listen, I'll just share you the suspense. Rachel will be doing all the work, and and you'll just try to help her any way you can.
That's right around his birthday, too, so it could be...
Yeah, July's going to be busy.
Have y'all taught names yet?
Everybody has told me I should name it after them.
I tell you,
Terry included.
Well, I'll tell you, I know how important I know how important Danny is to you. I think Danny or Daniel's a good name if you have a boy. What do you think?
That's an honor. Don't, but that's an honor.
It'll be Rachel's decision.
Rachel's you're a smart guy.
Jared, appreciate the time.
I appreciate Hill Southern GATA.
Thanks, man.
Once again, Jared Binko, the Director of Athletics for Georgia Southern Athletics. Oh, I love that guy.
Well, he did the hibachi this weekend.
Oh, that's true.
Did the hibachi.
I could picture you as a hibachi guy.
No, hibachi. Well, I need the hat to get a little bit taller, but I feel like those hibachi chefs have to be at least 6 feet tall because you have to be looking down. If you're too close, I'm going to burn something that's not the food. I'm talking about a limb or something. But
depending on which limb, you're good. Like, you don't really need your left arm all that much, do you?
It depends what we're talking about.
True. That's true. But really, and if you haven't read it yet, it's on gseagles.com, the Benko briefing, the letter from Jared out to Eagle Nation, and does one of those every so often, and being able to get a hand out and the message out to Eagle Nation, I think, is really important.
And I think it was very beneficial to do it the way that he did regarding the increases that are coming up, because as he mentioned, it's been 8 years since this was even explored. Moving up to the FBS, everything kind of froze. Not necessarily that it was static, but just wanted to make sure that everybody was on board with the transition at that time, with what is not necessarily on the horizon anymore. We're about to see shovels in ground, steel getting delivered, 2 major projects going on at the same time, and how we all can pull on that rope. You look at a gift at what Anthony Tippins gave, the $2 million gift to be able to get the IPF started, and how awesome it was to be able to talk about that during the BYU weekend, the unveiling of the signage over at Paulson Stadium, and just how important of a weekend that was for all the people that have been part of this athletic program for 40 years now.
Yeah.
But everybody's going to get a chance to put their stamp on where we are headed. So it's important to understand that while this looks like nobody ever likes to see prices go up, but with what we're on the cusp of and what we potentially can do, it is an investment for a positive future.
No doubt about it. As we now look ahead into Georgia Southern Athletics, it's starting to get busy around here now. And we haven't even got to baseball and softball in full swing. They've started individual practices.
Baseball, softball, full swing. Very good.
I think I do that every year.
They're inside of
try to do it.
Well, softball's inside of a month. They're going to begin their season with 4 consecutive weekend multi-team showcases, 2 of which are going to take place here in Statesboro. Jared's going to have Sharon Perkins joining him tomorrow in the return of Tuesday Talks, which you can watch on Facebook Live. You can get your questions into him and for Coach Perkins as she is about to enter year 1 baseball, coming up on a month away from first pitch out in Knoxville. But as you mentioned a little bit earlier, multiple sports getting their seasons going over the weekend.
One that has been going, but had the first round of wild card NFL football this past weekend. The new schedule. You like the new schedule?
As far as
you had the wild card, the top in each AFC, NFC get the bye.
Yeah.
And then you've got games Saturday, Sunday, and then there's one still to play tonight.
Yeah, you got Rams Cardinals tonight.
You like the schedule? Or just whatever?
I just like the fact that the playoffs have full crowds.
That's true.
And I think we're underestimating that a little bit because a year ago there were hardly any crowds anywhere. I believe for the Super Bowl they did allow somewhere around 20,000 people at Tampa Bay, which would probably not have been much if the Buccaneers weren't playing, but that's beside the point. But to have crowds back in almost every way has been a quote-unquote breath of fresh air this year. And I know that Omicron is doing what it's doing, but like he talked about in his comments, it looks like at a lot of places it has peaked, but with the NCAA coming out and saying as of February the 1st, if you're not boosted, you are going to be considered unvaccinated. So while that could present a lot more postponements and cancellations, maybe this will be a kick in the behind to a lot of places and a lot of programs to just be responsible and be safe. Don't be the hard line, but just say, look, this is what can happen as we're trying to re-grab that sense of normal. It keeps getting pulled farther and farther away from us with as many variants and as many variations of all of this as we're seeing. So if we can just do our part, like we've talked about Eagle Nation doing its part, then maybe we can be a little bit better of a spot than we could be.
But you talk about NFL first round of the playoffs. You had Tyler Bass and Matt Breida for the Buffalo Bills. They knocked off the Patriots 47-17. Tyler Bass had 5 extra points in that game, and with Josh Allen, that's all he really needed to do. Then you had Kansas City just demolishing Pittsburgh, 42-21. Jerick McKinnon had a heck of a game. 12 carries for 61 yards, also had 6 receptions for 81 yards, had a little shovel pass touchdown catch from Patrick Mahomes.
I don't know if that... I mean, shovel pass is usually the pitch, but this was literally underhanded as you're shoveling.
Yeah, speaking of Sharon Perkins, it was almost a rise ball.
But that was their first touchdown. That's what got them on board.
I think it tied the game up because I think Pittsburgh had the first score and then Kansas City. But with the Chiefs winning and the Bills winning, the Bills will face the Chiefs in the divisional round. It's coming up on Sunday, 6:30. So you've got the Jet going up against T-Bass and Breida.
That'll be a rematch of last year's AFC Championship game.
That's right. I forgot about that. But a couple of sports getting in action this past weekend, men's tennis being one of them. They fell 7-0 to Florida State on Sunday. They will hit the courts again on Thursday at number 10 Wake Forest. That one up in Winston-Salem. And then they will turn around and head to Greenville on Sunday to take on Furman. So a busy week for Georgia Southern men's tennis, and first-year head coach Jeremy Bayon.
I'm glad you said Furman, because when you said Greenville, part of me wanted to think Greenville, North Carolina, and East Carolina.
Nope.
We should be conditioned to know that Greenville is Furman because of our days in the Southern Conference, but you always got to make sure.
They're both purple, too. I don't know what is about Greenville and purple.
Because Greenville, North Carolina is supposed to be the Emerald City, and that's not purple.
No.
That's green.
It's not. Very good.
Greenville.
Women's tennis will open up their spring portion of the schedule on Saturday against number 10 in the country, Georgia Tech, 11 a.m. the first serve. That's the rematch of the NCAA Regional that you saw with women's tennis going to their first NCAA Regional last year, falling to Georgia Tech. So they will get the rematch to open up the spring portion of the schedule before they return for the home opener on Sunday against Jacksonville State, with 2 p.m. being the first serve at the Wallace Tennis Center.
I can still remember us coming back home from the Coastal Carolina Baseball Series during the spring, following the championship match by phone, and realizing that when the championship point had been won, just won a title.
I remember, and when Chad Jackson and I were coming home from Coastal Carolina women's basketball last week, we stopped at the same gas station that we had stopped at coming out of town when Aaron was leaning over the back of the seats telling us what the different scores were. But I was like, hey, that's where I found out that women's tennis had won. It was fun. And
you had that in golf within 10 days of each other after, what was it, 2 combined championships from the inception of the Sun Belt back in 2014. That was a really fun stretch.
No doubt. Georgia Southern Rifle was ranked number 18th in the country, and they defeated number 19 in the country in the Citadel, 463 along to go with 45-50. Ashley Judson led the way with a 1160 aggregate and took the gold individually. Erin Ballard set a career high with a 1156 aggregate, second individual. She also set a career high with the 573 in the small board. Amy Visconti took third individually and was a career high in the aggregate and air rifle as well. They will take on the Citadel again coming up on Saturday, 8 a.m., the first shot over in Charleston, so almost a home-and-home type deal. But they will take on the Citadel once again, number 18 in the country, Georgia Southern Rifle, against number 19 in the country in the Citadel Bulldogs.
I think about somebody like an Ashley Judson who was asked to do a lot from day one. That roster, they were freshmen, then they became, what she call them, Froshmores?
The
Froshmores. But she's a 2-time co-air rifle athlete of the year in the Southern Conference. To start off with success, I mean, I think that she would ultimately figure it out regardless of how things began. But if your first shot's on target, hopefully the rest of the shots are on target.
Yeah, you're good at that point.
I would think so.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to hit the paper, let alone the 10.
I can still remember when we did Battle with the Eagle Stars last summer, and who was really good at it and who wasn't really good at it.
And there was not a whole lot of in between.
No, you were either close to an 11 or you were about a 4, 3, 8.
Swimming and diving were supposed to get going this past weekend at home, but because of COVID concerns, that one had to be canceled. They will open up the season this Saturday, and they will head to Greenville, North Carolina, to face East Carolina. You're just a little ahead of your time.
I didn't even know you were going to talk about it.
Look at there.
Just gave it a try.
Indoor track and field started the indoor season at the Gamecock opener in Columbia. Imani Moore took home first place in the long jump with a 5.62 meters. Second place in the triple jump with 11.48 meters. Triple jump has got to be one of the what looks like most toughest competitions. Yeah. I have a hard time jumping once, let alone 3 times.
Yeah, and to do it with the gracefulness and the athleticism that they show.
Yeah, I would not be anywhere close to graceful. But Kellen Posey posted the second highest pole vault in program history as well in the opener for the Gamecock opener in Columbia. They will head to Lynchburg, Virginia on Friday and Saturday for the Liberty Elite Invitational. Not just the Liberty Invitational. This is the Elite Invitational, as you would expect for Liberty folks.
Absolutely, I would.
Georgia Southern women's basketball this week finally got 2 games in. How about that?
You did play 2, that's
we
right.
We did.
Yeah.
I kind of got used to this 1 game a week thing, but
yeah, I'm not sure what that's like.
Yeah, I turned around Saturday. I was like, wait a minute, we got another one. Thursday fell 78-74 to the Texas State Bobcats on TikTok night.
How'd that go?
Very well. Okay. Very TikTok-ish. Are you on TikTok?
No. I was going to ask you if you were in a TikTok.
I wasn't in a TikTok. My TikTok is just scrolling, looking at everything else. Which really, I think they call it a For You page. It's basically baseball umpires and then a couple radio people and then some just random dancing. I don't really know how all that gets calculated. Probably don't want to know how it gets calculated. But it was TikTok night. But fell 78-74 to the Texas State Bobcats. It was a game that Texas State led for pretty much the entirety of the game, where Georgia Southern got down 26-15 after the first quarter. Were able to battle back, and the second quarter was really good for Georgia Southern, outscored Texas State by 5, but just didn't feel like you could ever get over the hump of the first quarter. And when you got the momentum, Texas State got the momentum back in the tail end of the third quarter, and that was going to be all she wrote after the 78-74 victory for the Bobcats. Did have 3 Eagles in double figures. Taryn Ward had 23. Good to see her coming back. She had been on the COVID list. She had been on the concussion list. She had the COVID list in the middle of her concussion protocol. And so you got 2 protocols crashing into each other, which takes somebody a lot smarter than me, and thankfully Lane is. But Maya Burns with 11, Taya Gibson also in double figures with 10 points as well against Texas State.
And we talked with Brant Freeman last week. It was nice to finally get him on and actually get a chance to show everybody that he did join us. But one of the 2 that he talked about for Texas State was Denasia Hood, and she ends up with 30 points. So we knew that she was going to be an important factor, but to be able to do that almost single-handedly, giving the Bobcats the victory.
She is somebody that has mastered the mid-range jumper, and it's something you and I have talked about, that you don't see a whole lot of college athletes do the mid-range anymore.
I love Kamari Brown.
She was all about it. She started 6 of 6 from the floor, and Chad Jackson said something to the effect of, well, she can't keep this up the whole time. And I told him to knock on some wood, and the next time down the floor, she missed a crazy layup. So I was like, thank you, Chad.
Go 15 feet further out.
Yeah.
Knocked one
Yeah,
out.
exactly. But they moved on to Saturday, and Georgia Southern knocking off the UT Arlington Mavericks 64-63. This was one of the crazier games to ever watch inside Hanner Fieldhouse. And I know that's a strong statement considering some of the games that we've seen.
Some of the games you've seen especially.
But both teams had a double-digit lead in the first half. And you talk about a back-and-forth game, and you're usually talking about, okay, first team up by 2, second team up by 2, back and forth that way.
Yeah.
This was more of, okay, a 13-0 run, then a 17-0 run the other way. And so many huge swings of momentum in this game, but luckily Georgia Southern able to come out with a victory 64-63 over UT Arlington. And this is a game, Coach Howard talked about it before, it was going to be one of the toughest, if not the toughest, teams that Georgia Southern faces all year. So much experience with this UT Arlington team. Krista Gerlich had this program so set up when she departed for Texas Tech a couple of years ago. Sharika Wright comes in and just keeps adding to the success that UT Arlington has had. But a really good UT Arlington team, and I think having their first weekend of 2 games apiece really caught up to them, especially doing it on the road. But at the end of the day, Georgia Southern splits the week in a 64-63 victory for Georgia Southern.
And it was probably necessary that the second quarter was as good for the Eagles as it was, because it came down to the last couple of seconds, and UTA's going in for a layup, which would have given them a 3-point lead, but Maya shows up, block out of bounds, and to get possession back, and then it's her that's making the decisive free throws the next couple of seconds, forced the turnover on the final possession, and what could have been a loss becomes a win very rapidly, and a landmark victory early in conference play for Coach Howard.
Yeah, Maya Burns really needed this one, and Coach Howard talked about it. Maya's been struggling the last week or so on the floor, but really good to see her have a double-double, 23 points, 10 rebounds, 4 on the offensive glass. Did a really good job, set a career high with 4 threes made in this game. So a huge shout-out to Maya Burns and a huge part of this victory for Georgia Southern women's basketball. Women's basketball will have a 1-game week, just when we got used to this whole 2 games thing.
So you got too cocky.
I know, right? But right when we got used to it, you go back to the whole scheduling, we'll call it a fiasco to play nice. But
it's all part of a larger plan that we don't know about.
Yeah. Men's basketball playing 18 conference games.
Yeah.
Women's basketball playing 16 conference games. This is where it all gets into it. The Georgia State weeks, you only play once. So this week, women's basketball will only play at Georgia State on Saturday, 11:30 a.m. So brunch with Chad and I for Georgia Southern women's basketball at Georgia State on Saturday. Next week, you'll be back to hopefully 2 games in a week. The following week, it'll only be Georgia State at home. So the beginning of February, you only have 1 game per week. And so this week, will head up to Georgia State in the third floor of the Georgia State Sports Arena for an 11:30 tip-off.
This is what we had grown accustomed to with that quote-unquote travel partner rivalry matchup. You got the whole week to get ready for them, and I loved it because there was natural build-up, especially when it's Georgia Southern and Georgia State. You need all that extra time to talk about the matchups, whether it's the men's or the women's side. But for the men this year, they're playing those two games in 3 days. That's what Coastal and App just did. Ironically, the two teams that are scheduled to come here this weekend to Hanner Fieldhouse. Coastal and App played in Conway on Saturday. They played in Boone on Thursday. Now they won't see each other for the rest of the year. And that's your supposed regional rival travel partner, however you want to phrase it.
And the crazy thing is, I thought this is the way that women's basketball was going to do it across the board. It just so happens this is the way. Now, there's most of them that have your travel partner on your one-game weeks. But like Texas State and UT Arlington, they play each other on a Thursday, Saturday, home and road, like men's basketball is doing with Georgia State.
And then they will February, I think.
And then Texas State and UT Arlington women's basketball play each other in 1 week, so they don't have the travel partner where they only play once.
Yeah.
The games that they only play once a week are like the Arkansas, where 1 week they'll go to Arkansas State, then 2 weeks later the only game they play is out to Little Rock.
And another way that they've made the 16 games work, some of these are split weekends. In the case of Georgia Southern, the Louisiana Ragin' Cajun women were in Mobile as part of that doubleheader, the split doubleheader. So the Cajuns played South first. That's why we were a little bit delayed on Saturday from the Mitchell Center.
How is Steve Peliquin?
Just wonderful. Had a Coca-Cola right in front of him. Saw
no
Josh,
water.
Absolutely not. Perish the thought of that. Not Paris, Louisiana. Anyway, Josh Bruner was there. Had a chance. I hadn't seen him in a while. So him and JT and I talked, and we were all wearing the same style long sleeve pullover.
Oh, fantastic!
The newer material.
Right.
We ended up getting with our logo on it.
Uh-huh.
All the same material. We didn't get a picture, so we can't document it. Sorry. But to get back to the original point, Louisiana was at home against Troy on Thursday, and they beat the Trojans, and then they had to come to Mobile. I believe that's about a 5-hour trip to be able to play for Saturday, and that's what Coastal and App just did, playing the one game in Boone Thursday, 5-hour trip to go to Conway for a Saturday afternoon game, and that went to overtime.
Ugh.
So that's just another set of nuances between the men's and the women's scheduling this year.
Ugh. No, thank you.
But
okay.
Steve's great. Bruner's great. Cajuns came back and won. They were down early to South, but Cajuns ended up hitting a couple of threes late and ended up winning by 7.
So you got the scout for us.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they can shoot.
Fantastic.
Good luck. They can shoot.
Fantastic.
They can shoot the 3-ball.
With this Georgia State game coming up on Saturday, Panthers 6-9, 0-3 in conference play. They had a little bit of COVID issues at the beginning of Sun Belt play when they were supposed to be playing Arkansas State and then Appalachian State. But Georgia State, it's a lot of the same names. Cameron Ziak is one of the best shooters in this league. Deasia Merrill, one of their tops, and then Ashley Foster, the senior out of McDonough, leading the way with 11 points a game. It's a team that has struggled at times throughout this season, but have played a really tough schedule, a lot like we talked about with Texas State coming in last week, a really tough schedule, and so you don't necessarily this early in conference play, and I say this early in conference play, we're 3 weeks into it, but you don't necessarily take the schedule really all that seriously. And it's Georgia Southern, Georgia State, so forget those schedules.
You're 3 weeks in, and Little Rock still hasn't played a game?
They finally did. They played last week.
Up until last week. So
correct.
the first 2 weekends, they were wiped out because of COVID. On the men's side, Georgia State's men have only played 2 games out of a possible 6. I think it's only 8 teams. I say only, but only 8 teams have played at least 4 games. So that means 4 teams, if they go by the 80%, would have to be reseeded if the tournament started today.
Women's basketball last week, going into last week, had 3 teams that had not played a game in conference play.
80%.
It's
see what happens.
Crazy how that works.
Pensacola's coming up in about a month and a half.
And this was the week that you had no cancellations one day. You also had no cancellations all weekend on the women's side. So, that's a plus.
I'll take that as a positive.
Yeah,
sure.
no kidding.
Yeah.
for Georgia Southern men's basketball. Speaking of cancellations, Thursday, thought you were going to be heading down to Troy, Alabama to see our buddy Barry McKnight and get some mothers.
We don't play on Thursdays anymore, apparently.
No. Well, we didn't play on Saturdays until...
And South didn't play on Saturdays, so we finally decided to scrap that. We ended up playing on Saturday.
I realized that we were giving JT some guff last week of them not playing on Saturdays. I'm walking to my truck after this. I'm like, wait a minute, we haven't played on a Saturday either. But we both rectified that situation.
That's
this
just
weekend.
where we are right now, unfortunately.
But didn't have to face a Scott Cross team that we were talking about last week is much improved and really on the track that they thought they were going to be, but that one gets canceled on Thursday. You turn the attention to South Alabama that was riding the high of knocking off Georgia State on national television on ESPN2 on that Thursday in the Mitchell Center. And then you go in to face the Richie Riley squad. 73-67 is the final score. South Alabama defeats Georgia Southern, but had to come back from a double-digit deficit in the second half. Made it a game where at times you didn't necessarily think it might have been.
First of all, okay with not having to go play Troy on the road, even though Trojan Arena is one of the gems of this league. It opened 10 years ago, but it still looks practically new. Yeah. But when Troy hopefully comes to Hander later this year, Georgia Southern's won 7 straight against Troy here, so maybe that'll be a chance to make that all better.
Come on, Barry.
But like we talked about with Coach Berg on the Cutwater Spirits Countdown and Tip-Off on Saturday, it's been stop and go, and it's been tough to establish any kind of rhythm because for 2 straight weeks, the Eagles have been prepping for a Thursday opponent that they never saw.
That's true.
Now, beat Arlington last Saturday, which was an outstanding game. Turned out to be a really good win because Arlington just lost its second league game. They've only won of 3 in the league on the men's side that have played all 6 conference games. But even this week, having all that attention on Troy, Wednesday morning, gone, no game. So having to shift gears, getting rid of that scout for Troy, and trying to rapidly install a South Alabama scout. And it's Georgia Southern's longest bus trip in whatever the sport, the way that we have the travel structure.
For now.
The way that we have our travel structure, thankfully, because Little Rock's bust here, ULM's bust here, and anyway.
I wonder how many of the new schools that we'll bust to.
Maybe Southern Miss, but outside of that, the other 3 in the East, you'd have to fly to them. Just too far.
Oh, don't say you have to, but yeah.
Norfolk, Harrisonburg, Huntington, those are not easy gets.
No. I'm not saying it'd be fun. Southern, don't say you have to.
But baseball bust to Southern Miss in 2018 for that 3-game series.
Where Frank was looking for Brett Favre the entire time.
I don't think he ever found it.
I don't think he did either. Anyway.
But for the Eagles, longest bus trip, they went the sleeper route, which the team voted on. The team enjoyed it coming back from, well, they didn't enjoy it, but they actually felt like they got some rest and recuperation following the Morehead State trip, where it was a 10-hour bus ride home after the loss to those Eagles out in Kentucky during non-conference play. But having to go there, spend most of Friday traveling, earlier tip on Saturday, not too early, but yeah, granted, that was bumped a half hour because the women's game, shoving our tip-off a little bit later. And it felt like that there was some offensive frustration because the Eagles did not shoot it well in the first half. They missed their final 9 tries from 3. They got down by 13 points 3 minutes into the second half. But for about a 5-minute stretch midway through, they were in position to win because they scored, I think it was a 15-3 run, erased their biggest deficit since Brian Burke took over, had a 3-point lead. But then South Alabama switched to his own. Georgia Southern had trouble probing that. They ended up missing 10 of their final 11 shots. South put together a 10-0 run, and they made enough free throws to win it by 6. It followed the script that most of these games do between these two. Somebody gets a big lead, mostly double digits. The other side comes back, and then the team that led in the first place ends up making enough free throws at the end to win. It's almost how every game between the two has gone since Georgia Southern joined the Sun Belt. The Mitchell Center has been a very tough place for the Eagles to win at ever since they joined the league. I was really impressed with South Alabama's athleticism. And for Georgia Southern, not having Prince Toyambi because of COVID protocol, the hope is he is good for this weekend against the Carolinas. Caden Archie's been playing banged up with that ankle. Kamari Brown's left knee hasn't been 100%. His minutes were a little bit limited. And you got Elijah McCadden back off COVID protocol because he missed the Arlington game. He did not start, but he played really well in the second half. He had 17 of his 19 after halftime. 3rd career double-double, came up with a career-high 11 rebounds. But you just felt like if Georgia Southern could have converted a couple of more of those opportunities from in close, it would have been a much different game.
Turn the attention to the Carolinas coming in on Thursday. We'll have the band back together since women's basketball only plays one game. I'll actually get to see you for a game.
You saw me last Saturday.
That's true. Meh.
And semantics.
Yeah, whatever. The Coastal Carolina coming in on Thursday, 7 p.m. the tip-off inside Hanner Fieldhouse. It's a Chanticleer team, 9-8 overall, 1-4 in conference play. Again, they've had to deal with cancellations throughout the Sun Belt Conference slate. But you talked about it, a tough weekend for them, losing at Appalachian State 61-60. You make that drive back to Conway, South Carolina, which is not a fun one. Fell in overtime 84-76 to Appalachian State in Conway in the second part of that game. It hasn't necessarily gone the way for Cliff Ellis and his squad the last couple of weeks, but still a pretty talented Coastal Carolina team.
You were with me for one of the Coastal home games last year because you had a cancellation on your side, so you were there for that Saturday game.
I was.
You were there for the Elijah McCadden three in the final second game for that win.
I did. I was there.
So let's hope we can get some kind of that magic back.
Correct. Maybe we have to go back to the other side of the floor. Get our stage back. I really want our stage back.
Where is that stage?
I don't know, but I need to find it.
I think that this Coastal team is better than its 9-8 record. They don't seem to play a whole lot on the road unless they're going to the Bahamas for a multi-team event. Leave it to Cliff Ellis. If he's leaving, of course he's going to go to Florida or the Bahamas. That's just how Cliff Ellis is going to roll. You're not going to tell him it's not. But they don't play very much away from Conway and true road games. They're 0-4 on the road this year. I say that, but a year ago was the same idea. They got up to a great start. They ended up going 18-8, which is their best season since joining the Sun. But their first road victory was here last year. It was on a Friday night. Game was bumped to ESPN2 because I believe it was South Alabama and Georgia State. They got postponed, so they needed an extra game. Move hours in. Unfortunately, Coastal got the win 79-62 very next day. We talked about McCadden's buzzer beater. 61-58 was the final. Georgia Southern then went on COVID pause themselves and lost the one game up in Conway. The one thing that makes this Coastal team different, no Devontae Jones.
Yeah.
Player of the year last year, did everything for them. He averaged 3 steals a game in addition to the 21 points per game. They tried to replace it a little bit. They get Rudy Williams, the transfer from Kansas State. He's averaging about 13 points per game. You begin on the inside with Assam Mustafa, one of the league's best big men, and Mike Bellato brought this up in his comments on Zoom before the season began. In this wave of positionless basketball, it's nice to see the Sun Belt have so many teams with dedicated big men. Of course, he's got one of the best anywhere in Norshad Omir, who's the preseason player of the year. But for Mustafa, 6'9", 250 from Egypt, he's averaging 15 and 10. That's a double-double. He's averaging.
Oh, yeah.
Numbers have gone down a little bit since the start of conference play. It seems that he's either crushing you or he's invisible. And if you can get them into transition defense, you can get him out of the game because he's not great at running the floor, and Coastal has troubles getting back. A year ago, what made the difference for them is their defense. They led the league in multiple defensive categories. They were top 30 nationally in multiple categories. This year, they're giving up 38% from the field. That's number one in the league, giving up just 65 points per game overall. They get it on you because they confuse you.
Yeah.
And the one thing about Cliff Ellis, when he speaks, you're not going to hear the phrase, man, I've never seen that before, because he's been coaching for 47 years. So I don't think there's anything he hasn't seen. But with all that knowledge, he's able to drop in the junk zone defenses.
Yeah.
They're going to be a man team. You'll see a 2-3, a 1-3-1, triangle and 2, box and 1, simply to confuse you. When they do that, they give up a lot of threes, and to Georgia Southern's credit, some of their best three-point performances since Coastal joined the league have been against the Chanticleers. But it's their thought that you can start hot, but eventually all those threes are going to stop falling. When they do, they love to get into transition offense. They run the floor really well. Up-tempo team. They're 1-4 in conference play. They beat ULM to start by 30. And you thought, oh, okay. 94-64 first conference game. Everybody else is in trouble. They've lost their last 4. 2 by a point and 1 in overtime. So the margin for them being maybe as good as 4-1 as opposed to 1-4, razor thin.
Yeah, and the thing that really stood out to me seeing them last year and seeing them a couple of times was the fact that their offense runs through Ibrahim Adiba. I mean, you're looking at 6, almost 7 assists per game He was, I think, 18th, 19th nationally a year ago.
Yeah.
He's in the top 10 this year for right now. He is somebody that, and it's weird to say somebody at 6'6" is where the offense runs through, but he is pretty impressive when you see him live.
A year ago, he led the league in assists, and he wasn't the point guard.
Yeah.
Devontae Jones was the point guard. When he touched the ball, it was Devontae Jones's ball. He had one of the higher usage rates in the country. He got to the free throw line a ton, was better than 84%, so he was able to average 21 a game because he converted almost every available scoring opportunity. Deba has gone back to his natural point guard position. You say 6'6", you don't see very many 6'6" point guards anywhere, much less in the Sun Belt. Almost 7.5 assists per game in conference play. He just does everything. He doesn't score a lot, but he doesn't need to because his fingerprints are all over a box sheet.
Yeah.
When you realize how many points he's not only responsible for giving Coastal, but with as good as he is on defense, how much he is helping stop the other side score.
So Thursday it'll be Coastal Carolina inside Hanner Fieldhouse, and then Georgia Southern men's basketball will turn their attention 3 p.m. on Saturday to the Appalachian State Mountaineers coming in to Hanner Fieldhouse, and a lot of the same names you've heard for
All of them.
Yeah.
Not one guy lost to the transfer portal, not one guy brought in from the transfer portal. This is basically the same team that we put together for our prep last year.
Yeah. Justin Forrest is going to be the guy that you talk about a lot, but you look up and down this sheet, it's all the same names. All of them.
It is a blue out on Saturday.
Ooh.
So if you
Wear
have not
your blue.
if you have not seen that, wear your blue. It's a rivalry game against Appalachian State. Forrest is one of the most dangerous players in this league, even though his offense has been down the last 2 years because he's been mostly coming off the bench. Different philosophy changing over because he was recruited initially and played under Jim Fox. Different system under Dustin Kearns. It's worked because they went to the NCAA tournament last year for the first time in 21 years.
Good for Harrison.
Forrest's numbers are down, but still lethal shooting the basketball. If he touches the ball, he's going to try to get his points. That hasn't changed. Michael Almonacci, who ran through the conference tournament last year, had 32 in the title game against Georgia State, was the most outstanding player. His numbers are down a little bit, but a three-point gunner. You cannot leave him alone. He runs this team. He is the starting point guard. The guy that has finally taken the step forward, and this is very similar to the conversation we had for Arlington, how we always thought that David Azor could be the kind of player he is now, and he's second in the league in scoring. Adrian Delve is one of the league's best players.
Yeah.
He was always one of the better athletes, one of the better slashers, one of the better defenders, but in terms of his offense, so streaky, especially from three-point territory. He's not streaky anymore. He shoots more threes than anybody in the league. He makes more threes than anybody in the league. His defense has gotten better. He's scoring better than 16 a game, which is fourth in the conference coming into the weekend. He is now not somebody that you're not worried if you're going to get the points. You just have to worry on the other side how many. Scored 39 in a game earlier this year against Vermont. He had 29 against ULM. He has become the guy that App thought he could be when they recruited him 5 years ago.
Finally, before we wrap this one up, one news note coming out for Georgia Southern Athletics this past week that the nominations for the Hall of Fame are now open. You can go on gseagles.com as the Georgia Southern Athletics Hall of Fame. The deadline to nominate somebody for the class of 2022 is on Friday, March 11th, and they are only accepted online. There's a link there that you can send in all the information you have on a player, coach, administrator, supporter. There's a lot of different ways that you can be inducted into the Hall of Fame for Georgia Southern, but that is open now and will run through March 11th for the class of 2022.
They've changed it because now it's every 2 years, and you may be thinking, well, there was an induction ceremony last fall. That was the 2020 class. This year, there will be a 2022 class inducted for this calendar year to get things back on track as we inch towards, I think it's 170-some members in the Georgia Southern Athletics Hall of Fame. Such a great committee that goes through so many nominations every year to pick the best of the very best. We'll get a chance to meet them and their families once we get towards the fall. And this is MLK Day.
Yeah.
We had Jared talk real briefly about that earlier. Georgia Southern has a really special connection to the idea of progress in this respect. because this has been reported a number of times. We've never had a chance to speak about it specifically on the podcast. We've never done an episode on an MLK Day. We were formerly on Tuesdays. But the first black student athlete in the history of the university system of Georgia was given a scholarship to Georgia Southern. That was Roger Moore back in 1967. Savannah native, Beach High School. His teammate, Gene Moore, the very next year was added, and then you saw gradually more and more progress with guys like a Johnny Mills, a Richard Wallace, a Charlie Gibbons, who would go on to be the first black coach for any sport at Georgia Southern, setting the groundwork for Del McGee, for Kevin Woodley. I know that they're only interim coaches, but that's still ascending to a part where no one had done before them. Also Anita Howard, first black female to ascend to a head coaching position. Coincidentally enough, Beach High School is where she played. But all those athletes that we have seen, it's only 55 years ago, but for Georgia Southern to have played a role in this state and this region, we've done a lot. There's still absolutely a lot more to do, but to turn back those pages of the Georgian and be able to see that Georgia Southern was a part of this, it's a powerful thing because it still wasn't that long ago.
And it's something that you tie in with MLK Day, Brian Berg and men's basketball. When you're coming back from Arkansas just a couple of weeks ago, you have to fly out of Memphis.
Right.
So Brian Berg making the conscious effort to go by the Lorraine Motel, and Jared talked about it, not having it just be you get a degree and get to play a sport here at Georgia Southern. It's you leave with a lot more.
I really appreciated him doing that because he had been working on that for ever since he got here. You know, he spent his time at Little Rock. He had been out to Memphis before, the Little Rock Central High School and the Little Rock Nine. He wanted to tie that all together. He wanted to let the team go see history.
And he's not the first one to do that. You've had Georgia Southern Baseball go by the Lorraine Motel on their way out to Jonesboro as well. A couple of different teams have done that. With the proximity to Arkansas State, you have to fly in and out of Memphis, or you have to go through Memphis if you're busing it. But something as simple as men's basketball a couple of years ago, going by the Pentagon, and so many different things
that was awesome.
So many different things that tie in the history, tie in the reason you're able to go and play a sport is because of everything that's happened before you.
And for much of the Georgia Southern roster to be consisting of black student athletes, to go and see that white wreath in front of room 306 of the Lorraine Motel a couple of weeks ago after that Arkansas swing, you can't tell me that those guys didn't get the feels.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that they've learned about it. But I'm going to guess that none of them have ever been that close to a spot where our world changed forever.
Yeah, no doubt.
And even that's only been since 1968.
Yeah, and it's something that we talk about all the time. That's a story that you're going to tell your kids, your grandkids. You're going to be telling that story for a long time.
The only thing, I wish it wasn't 33 degrees.
A little chilly.
Because we hopped off the bus, and it's been preserved for nearly 35 years now. They've done such a great job in the city of Little Rock to make sure that, and the city of Memphis to make sure that the high school, which is still an active high school, but the Lorraine Motel can remain in the condition that they are. But once we hopped off the bus, we were excited to be able to go see this. But once we realized it was 33 and the freezing rain and the snow was about to fall, okay.
Again, Georgia Southern men's and women's basketball in action this weekend. Just one game for women's basketball on Saturday, 11:30 the tip time. We'll be on the air at 11 o'clock with Chad Jackson and myself on the Cutwater Spirits countdown to tip-off. Danny and I will be together on Thursday for Georgia Southern men's basketball, taking on Coastal Carolina, 7 o'clock the tip time, 6:30 the air time with the Cutwater Spirits countdown to tip-off. And then Danny will have Appalachian State coming for you on Saturday, 3 o'clock the tip time with the 2:30 air time on the Georgia Southern Sports Network.
COVID permitting, we're going to try to play 2 games this week. No guarantees, but we are going to.
As of 7:14 on Monday, January 17th. Yep. That is our schedule.
Right.
And until this weekend, for the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed, this is Colin Lacy saying so long, everybody.
You've been listening to Inside Eagle Nation, powered by Learfield, the official podcast of Georgia Southern Athletics.